Hello and welcome to Northworthy Sagas and Stories. Please leave a comment. Now, my name is Njal Sigmundsson, and I'm a Scot, a storyteller. And the story I'd like to tell you today is called Illusions, Part 1. And it concerns the Viking god Thor. Now, Thor was the son of Odin. He was the strongest and mightiest of all the gods. He was the only one who was brave enough and fierce enough to do battle against the giants who were the enemy of the gods. And to aid him in his fight against the giants, Thor had a hammer called Mjolnir the Crusher, made for him by the dwarves of the underworld. And with the aid of that magical hammer, Thor wreaked havoc throughout the land of Jotunheim where the giants lived. And so it wasn't long before Utgardi, the king of the giants, heard about him, and about the havoc he was causing throughout the land of Jotunheim. And he wanted to get a measure of Thor. He wanted to understand this threat against himself and the giant race. So he sent out an invitation, inviting Thor to come and stay with him for a day or two, in his great hall, in the giant city of Utgard that was named after him. Now it wasn't long before this invitation got to the halls of Asgard. Thor was keen to go. He was not afraid. After all, he would take his hammer with him. But the gods thought it would be a good idea for Loki to accompany him. He was his brother, but his mother was a giantess. He had giant blood in his veins, and they thought Thor was less likely to come to any harm or bother if Loki was with him. So the pair made their way across the sky in Thor's great chariot, drawn by his two giant goats, Crack-Tooth and Gap-Tooth. They set off and finally arrived in the land of Jotunheim. Now the day was wearing on, and soon night would be falling, and they needed shelter and food. And now they came across a homestead, and the farmer there made them welcome, but he said, "I have very little food to give you." "No problem," said Thor. "We can eat my goats." So the goats were slaughtered, and the meat was roasted, and they all enjoyed a fine feast that evening. But while they were sat at the table in the kitchen, having their feast, Thor said to them all, "Now when you finish eating the meat, do not discard the bones. Don't throw them in the fire or into the cesspit, but save them and pile them carefully in the corner of the kitchen, for I shall have need of them come morning." So it was they retired to bed after the feast. But Thialfi, the farmer's son, he woke up in the middle of the night, still hungry. So he returned to the kitchen and went to the pile of bones, where he picked up a thigh bone, cracked it open and sucked out the marrow bone. He then went back to bed. Now, in the morning, Thor came to the kitchen and stood over the bones. He whispered a silent spell, and then suddenly the bones began to form, and on those, flesh, and on that, the fur. And before their very eyes, the goats were reformed, just as they were before, except Crack-Tooth had a little limp, had a slight limp. Thor knew something was wrong here, and Thialfi admitted that he had indeed taken the marrow bone from the goat's thigh the evening before. That is why he was lame. "It will take days for him to heal," said Thor, "and I've got to go and visit the giant." Now the farmer knew that Thor was angry. He knew he had to make amends for what they'd done to the goat. He said, "You take Thialfi, my son, with you. He knows these lands. He will be your foot servant. He knows all the shortcuts, the best ways to get to Utgard." "Very well," said Thor. "It's better than nothing, I suppose." And so it was they left. So the three companions, Thor, Loki and Thialfi, left the farm. And they were walking all day and grew tired. But just then they came across what seemed to be the mouth of a great cavern in the middle of the forest. So they went inside this cavern, and off to one side there was a cave. And they went into this cave to sleep. Now they did not light a fire, there was no need, for it was quite warm. And they soon fell asleep. But in the morning, Thor was awoken by a thunderous sound. He hated being woken up. He was still tired, and he was angry. So he got up and went outside the cavern. First thing he noticed, it wasn't a cavern they had slept in that night, but a giant's glove. Now the giant it belonged to was lying sound asleep, and the noise that Thor heard was his snoring. So Thor thought, I will silence this giant. So he got out his hammer, went and stood on the giant's shoulder, and while he still slept, cracked him at the side of the head. The giant carried on sleeping, didn't open his eyes, didn't stir, just carried on snoring. What's wrong with my hammer, thought Thor? It usually cracks the giant's skulls. So he went round to the other side, stood on his other shoulder, and gave another swift crack across the head. This time the giant just murmured something about a bird flapping around his ear. Still did not wake up. So frustrated, finally Thor stood on the giant's chest, brought up his hammer, cracked him square on the forehead. The giant opened one eye. Ooh, did a twig just fall on my head? Thor could not believe it. The power of his hammer did not work against this giant. He quickly hid it. The giant woke up and introduced himself as Thrym. And Thor, I have been expecting you. I've been sent by Utgardi to escort you to the gates of Utgard itself, where you can meet him. And so it was. The three companions followed Thrym to the gates of Utgard. Welcome, said Utgardi, king of the giants. Welcome to my city. But if you're going to stay in my hall tonight, well, you have to prove yourselves worthy. There must be a skill or talent that each of you have that you can impress myself and my giant friends with. The Elfie stepped forward. I am a swift runner, and I'm quite happy to have a running race with any one of your giants. Ah, excellent, said Utgardi. In that case, you must meet my friend Mimir. He's the swiftest amongst us. And we shall have a race around the city walls. We will start here at the main gate. Both of you run that way, and I'll meet you back here when you finish. Right, now go! And off they sped. Now it only seemed a matter of seconds to Thor until Mimir arrived at the gate. And Thialfi followed a few seconds afterwards. It was pretty close. Oh dear, said Utgardi. You were well beaten there. Well, said Thialfi, I hadn't realised we'd started. Oh, all right. Well, in that case, we must have another race to make sure. So, once more they set off around the walls of the city. It must have been a good 9 miles distance. And again, within seconds, Mimir was back. And it must have been a good minute or two when Thialfi finally came and arrived at the gate, panting, breathing heavily. Oh dear, 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 said Utgardi. It's even worse than the time before. What excuse have you got this time? No excuse, said Thialfi, but I want to try again. Very well, said Utgardi. One more race it is, but then that's it. So they had one more race. Mimir won again. This time, Thialfi was well behind. Oh dear, dear, said Utgardi. That's not a very good start, is it? Loki stepped forward. Watching all that running has given me an appetite, he said. And I'm quite happy, because my appetite is enormous. I'm quite happy to have a eating contest with any of the giants here. Very good, said Utgardi. Then you should meet my friend Hughie. He likes his food. Right, lay out my hall So they went to the great hall of the king, where 2 long tables were set up. On these tables were platters of gold and silver plates, wooden platters, and on these there was meats, whole oxen, goats, chickens, geese, fish from the oceans, fruits from the forest, bread. It was a mighty feast. Now the first person to eat all the food and get to the other end is the winner, said Utgardi. Off you go! And Loke, well, his enormous appetite helped him with this because there was a lot of food to get through. But he noticed the giant by his side was keeping up with him all the way. And when he'd finished eating all the food that was laid before him, and he reached the end of the table, the giant was there with him. Very well, said Loki, we'll call that a draw. I don't think so, said Utgardi. For it's true you've done well, Loki. You've eaten all the food laid before you. But as you will see, Hughie here has eaten all the food. All the platters the food was laid upon. And the table as well. So I would say you've lost that contest. Thor stepped forward. Drink. Now, I'm a drinker, and I'll have a drinking contest with any one of the giants here. Well, no need for a contest, said Utgardi, but there is a test for you. Now, you see that drinking horn over there on the floor? And he pointed over to a big drinking horn that was laying on the floor, beautifully decorated. And it was very large indeed, and it was full of mead. Now, that horn... See how many turns it takes for you to drain it? Now, I can do it in 1. Most of my friends here can do it in 2 drafts. My mother can finish it in 3. So let's see how you do. Thor was quite thirsty and he was quite eager to get out of this drinking horn. He took it in his lips and he began to gulp down the mead. And gulped further and further. He was drinking for a good while, and when he was getting short of air, began to gasp, he laid down the horn. But the level inside had hardly moved. Oh dear, dear, said Utgardi, that's 1 draft. Take another. Thor picked up the horn once more, and again, drunk deeply, until the liquid was pouring out over his beard. Finally he laid it down. And again, it had hardly gone down anything at all. Oh dear, said Utgardi. Well, as I've said, my mother can drain it in 3. Let's hope you can do it this time. Thor picked up the horn, feeling very bloated by now. Took a deep breath and began to gulp as much as he could. Gulp it down, and still he couldn't empty it. Ah, well. Is there anything else you can do, Thor? Now you're quite strong, so I hear. How about a trial of strength? Why not, said Thor. I'm not afraid. I will take a test against any giant. Well, said Utgardi, let's just see if you can lift my cat first. And he pointed out a cat, a giant cat, who was laying in the hall in front of the fire. Thor went over to the cat, crawled underneath it, so his back was underneath the cat's belly. Then he tried to lift himself, but he could hardly move the cat. So he gave up with that, and he tried all different ways. And in the end, the best he could manage was to lift 1 paw off the ground. Oh dear, dear, dear. I think all that drinking has sapped your strength, said Utgardi. Now Thor was being humiliated, and he was getting angry. Right, he said, wrestle. I will wrestle any one of your giants. Come on, I'm not afraid. Ah, now I have a wrestler for you. Mother! In walked his mother, slowly. She was bent over, she was a wizened old crone. Now then, mother, this young man here would like a wrestling contest with you. Oh, I've not had a wrestle for a while. This'll be fun. So she approached Thor, and they both locked hands. Thor was amazed at the strength of this old woman. Vice-like, she gripped him, crushing the bones in his hands almost. And the more he pushed against her, the more she just stood her ground and then began to force him back. So strong was she that she pushed him down eventually onto one knee. Enough, said Utgardi. I've seen enough. Well, Thor, you and your companions have failed in all your tests, but you tried your hardest. And for that, I will grant you to stay in my hall this evening. But in the morning, you take yourself your hammer and you must leave my city. So they stayed there the night and enjoyed the king's hospitality. But in the morning it was time to leave. The king led them all to the gates of Utgard, and once they got outside, he turned to Thor and he said, Thor, before you go, you should know this. You see, you think you've failed in the test I set before you, but you haven't, in truth, and I will tell you why. You see that giant you met, Thrym, who brought you here to my city? He was an illusion. And you see over there in the distance those three great valleys? You formed them when you thought you were striking his head with the hammer. You were actually digging those great valleys into the earth. And the cat, well, that you wrestled, that was the world serpent. Jormungand, that engulfs the whole world, encircling it, biting its own tail within its jaws. And you lifted its back so high, it touched the heavens. And the old lady you fought, that too was an illusion. That was old age. And old age brings all men to their knees in the end. The Elfie, the race you ran with Mimir. Mimir is no giant, he is thought. Nothing is swifter than thought. And Loki, the eating contest you had with Hugi. Hugi is fire, and fire consumes everything. So you see, none of you failed. In fact, you impressed me greatly, especially you, Thor. But I want this to be a warning to you. Should you ever come back to Jotunheim with the intention of using that hammer again, remember me. Remember how I've tricked you. And remember the great power of my magic. And with that, the giant disappeared. And then the walls of the city of Utgard began to shimmer, and they too slowly disappeared from view. And the three companions were left there alone to make their way back. And when Thor eventually did return to the halls of Asgard, they all gathered, and he recounted his tale, and he told them of his test, of what he achieved, but he also warned them of the giant's great magic. Here ends the story of Illusions. Thank you. Please subscribe